But arms spending and militarization is not just simply a mechanism for transferring wealth. It also, in many respects, is one of the most parasitic and non-productive sectors of the economy. And I would like to suggest that militarization and the military-industrial complex as a whole can be seen in many respects to be similar to other non-productive features of the capitalist production as a whole. The speculative activities, the hedge funds, speculating on futures market, the currency, international currency markets, the whole debt repackaging that has taken place to extract further wealth and has helped to contribute to the growing of this debt bubble. All of these things have contributed to expanding the gap between the so-called real economy and the production of goods and services that people really need, and the so-called paper economy or virtual economy. And obviously that has contributed to, in particular, the financial crisis that exploded over the past 12 months globally, and starting in the US economy itself. Now, there are those who could argue that, well, you can't compare military spending to some of these other speculative activities because, after all, they are producing real things. They are producing tanks. They are producing, transport vehicles and Humvees and so on and so forth, and weapons. But in many respects, and not only do we know that military spending has less of an impact in terms of overall economic development, spin-off jobs, and so on, and because the profits are much higher in the military-industrial complex. But another aspect, of course, is that a big portion of the military budgets have no use value at all. And if they are ever used, they will lead to global catastrophe in the form of weapons of mass destruction and so on. So in many respects, you could say that that's not real production. It's producing things, but things which have no use value unless they're actually used in war, which will threaten to destroy all of humanity. And so in this respect, militarization further contributes to the contradictions and the volatility of national economies and the global economic situation, which of course is in the first place essentially a capitalist economy, global economy. Militarization also exacerbates the uneven development between states, not only with respect to first world countries versus the peoples of the third world, but even uneven development amongst the advanced imperialist countries themselves. You know that, and I can't remember I can't cite the particular reference at this point, I don't have it in front of me, but in fact many commentators have made the point, but one in particular was talking about the impact of the arms race during the Cold War, especially in the 80s, when Reagan and company, significantly stepped up and revitalized, if you will, the global arms race as a means of undermining socialism. We're going to bleed the Soviet Union white. We'll force them into bankruptcy. And one of these commentators made the point, based on his analysis also of the impact of the arms budget on the US economy, had speculated, and I think not without some justification, that if the Soviet Union had managed to hold out for another 4 or 5 years, the arms race, in fact, instead of bankrupting the Soviet Union, would bankrupt the US economy itself. Well, whether that's true or not, I guess, is something we can speculate upon. But there's no question that the arms race, and particularly the role of U.S. imperialism as the main driver of that global arms race, has had a disproportionately large impact on the fortunes of U.S. imperialism, and led some to speculate, in fact, that this is helping to bring about the decline and fall of the so-called U.S. empire compared to the British Empire in the 1800s and into the 1900s and so on, and what have you. Well, I don't think that there's any purpose in putting too fine a point on that, because U.S. imperialism is still the most powerful and dominant imperialist center in the world. But this crisis in particular has shown the weaknesses and the vulnerability of U.S. economic might compared to other imperialist states. And I just want to quote here very briefly some of the indicators that demonstrate that. First of all, the massive governmental debt and deficits in the U.S. Have now reached 50% of total government receipts. And the accumulated debt is estimated now in the range of $12.8 trillion. Much of it directly related to the expansion of arms spending over the past 20 years in particular. The increasing dependence of the United States economy on financing of its servicing of its debt, mostly in the form of bonds and securities, from foreign sources, and the net inflow of foreign direct investment to maintain production in the U.S. itself. And thirdly, the decline of the U.S. dollar, which is in a way an indicator of the relative strength and weaknesses of economies. I don't mean the momentary fluctuations that we see from one quarter to the next, but if you look at the U.S. dollar since 1971, and you track it in relationship to other leading currencies, you will see, in fact, that the U.S. dollar has lost almost 2/3 of its value in relationship to other leading currencies in the world. And so what I'm trying to get at, of course, is the role that militarization plays in terms of exacerbating the volatility which is inherent within capitalist production in general. Makes it worse, more intense, and contributes to the depth and the intensity of the crises when they do emerge, not least, of course, the current crisis, global crisis.